For over 6 years, bodybuilding enthusiasts have debated the veracity and implications of a statement made by Franco Columbu, a two-time Mr. Olympia and lifelong friend of Arnold Schwarzenegger, regarding Mike Mentzer. At the heart of this controversy is Franco's claim that he and Arnold trained at the same time and place as Mike Mentzer, and routinely observed him spending hours in the gym, suggesting that Mentzer's publicly advocated low-volume, high-intensity training principles were a disingenuous front. On its face, the claim appears to undermine Mike Mentzer's legacy, implying that he was misleading the public and his followers in order to sell training courses built on false premises. However, when analyzed critically within the broader historical, logistical, and political context of the bodybuilding world of the 1970s and early 1980s, Franco's assertion appears to crumble. Indeed, the evidence points towards either a significant lapse in memory or, more cynically, a deliberate attempt to discredit a man whose training ideology directly challenged the high-volume orthodoxy that Franco and Arnold represented. The geography of truth. Where did the bodybuilders actually train? To analyze Franco's statement, we must first consider the geography and timeline of gym affiliations during this period. Mike Mentzer arrived in California in June of 1977 and began training exclusively at Gold's Gym in Venice, then owned by Ken Sprague. By contrast, Arnold and Franco had already switched their allegiances to the newly opened World Gym by Joe Gold after a contentious legal fallout between Gold and Sprague following the 1972 sale of Gold's Gym. The gym wars of the era were not trivial. They were serious business conflicts with reputational and financial stakes. By the time Mike started training at Gold's, Arnold and Franco had long since departed. Arnold supported Joe Gold's new venture from its inception in early 1977 and never returned to Gold's until long after it changed ownership in 1979. The notion that Arnold and Franco trained in Gold's Gym with Mike Mentzer, observing him regularly, is flatly contradicted by historical records. Moreover, while the interviewer includes Ray Mentzer in his initial question,
I've heard that Ray and Mike did a lot more. Their training wasn't really that different from what you guys were doing.
He provides no source for this claim. Given that Ray was still living and training in Maryland until after Mike's Mr. Universe win in 1978, it's unlikely the interviewer, or anyone in the bodybuilding press, had directly observed Ray's training prior to his relocation. Ray's own articles from the period consistently echoed Mike's principles: high intensity, brief, and infrequent workouts. Therefore, the interviewer appears to be inserting hearsay into the discussion. Yet Franco, instead of clarifying or separating fact from rumor, accepts the loaded question and focuses on Mike Mentzer as though both brothers were equally implicated, despite his comments applying only to Mike. Thus, the implication that Franco and Arnold observed Mike training for longer periods in the same gym is demonstrably false. If Franco is to be believed, he would have had to be in a gym he avoided due to legal hostilities, watching a man who trained there exclusively during a time when Arnold and Franco trained elsewhere. The timeline simply does not support the claim. Training time and testimonies, the people who were actually there. One of the hallmarks of Mike Mentzer's heavy-duty system was its radical brevity. The method advocated high-intensity, low-volume workouts with plenty of recovery time, something revolutionary in a sport where marathon sessions were the norm. To evaluate Franco's suggestion that Mike trained for hours, we must consider the testimony of those who trained directly with him. Jack Neary, a writer and one of Mike's early training partners, reported that their workouts lasted about 40 minutes total for both participants. Mike Levinson, who trained with Mentzer in Maryland before his California days, noted that Mike would train his entire body in 45 minutes, 3 times a week. Roger Schwab, who supervised Mike's training leading up to the 1980 Mr. Olympia, confirmed that Mike's workouts lasted around 30 minutes and were performed using Nautilus machines. Even allowing for seasonal or experimental variation, the overwhelming consensus is that Mike's workouts were nowhere near the 2 or 3 hours Franco described. Furthermore, Mike himself often remained at Gold's Gym to socialize and converse with other bodybuilders, possibly explaining why someone might see him in the gym for an extended period without actually training the whole time. This misperception could account for a memory slip, but it's unlikely given Franco's implied certainty, the stakes involved, and the broader context of competition and ego. Motivation and malice. Why would Franco say this? The key question then becomes, why would Franco Columbu make this statement, especially years after Mentzer's death, when he could no longer respond? Arnold Schwarzenegger and Mike Mentzer had a well-documented rivalry, most notably during the controversial 1980 Mr. Olympia, in which Arnold made a surprise return and took the title, causing widespread outcry. Mentzer, who placed fifth in a decision many viewed as political and unjust, was so disillusioned by the result that he retired from competitive bodybuilding. Jack Neary once quoted Arnold as saying he would, quote, see to it that nobody took Mentzer's training methods seriously, close quote. If that is true, then Franco's comment serves as an extension of that long-standing campaign to delegitimize Mentzer's ideology. Franco, Arnold's closest friend and confidant, may have been using his platform to retroactively reinforce the high-volume approach they both represented by painting Mentzer's low-volume advocacy as fraudulent. Additionally, Franco has a known history of questionable public statements. In 1980, he claimed he had only ever used anabolic steroids once, back in 1972, despite having competed in over a dozen contests and remaining a top-tier bodybuilder through the steroid-saturated 1970s. This statement has been widely dismissed as dishonest, particularly in an era when steroid use was rampant and relatively unregulated in the sport. Given this context, Franco's credibility is not beyond reproach. His assertion about Mike appears not just factually inconsistent, but motivated by a loyalty to Arnold and a desire to uphold the traditional training dogma they both represented. The reversal of Franco's intent, how Arnold's own record undermines Franco's claim. Franco Columbu's claim that Mike Mentzer trained for hours at a time, thereby contradicting the brief, high-intensity approach he so famously advocated, was clearly intended as a posthumous strike against Mentzer's credibility. When asked whether Mike and Ray Mentzer trained in a way fundamentally different from himself and Arnold Schwarzenegger, Franco replied,
But the same, and I tell you why. Because we go to the gym, like for example, Arnold and I usually used to go 7. We were there like 7:10, 10 minutes from the house.
Yeah.
From 7 to 9 we trained, sometimes to 10, and then afternoon another couple hours. When we trained from 7 to 9, Mike Mentzer was already there, and he never left until before I left.
Wow, okay.
So it cannot be that he only did his reps and he went home. He did more stuff.
In short, Franco is asserting direct eyewitness evidence, not just from himself, but from Arnold as well. The implication is powerful that both of them saw Mike Mentzer violating his own principles, thus exposing him as a hypocrite. But this claim, rather than strengthening the case against Mentzer, completely collapses when viewed against Arnold's own public record. Throughout the late 1970s and 1980s, Arnold repeatedly criticized Mentzer, not for dishonesty, but for promoting and actually using a low-volume, infrequent training method. His comments were never that Mentzer's workouts were disingenuous or secretly high volume, but that they were too minimal to produce real results. Arnold urged Mentzer to start doing 20 sets if he ever wanted to win the Mr. Olympia, and accused him of undertraining, not of misleading the public. Now, if Arnold truly believed, or had witnessed firsthand, that Mentzer was engaging in long, drawn-out workouts while publicly promoting 30-minute high-intensity routines, he would have said so. In fact, he would have had every reason to. Arnold was not only in a fierce public rivalry with Mentzer, especially after the 1980 Mr. Olympia controversy, but he also openly despised Mentzer's training philosophy and wanted it discredited. If he could have exposed Mentzer as a fraud, preaching one thing while doing another, it would have been the most devastating weapon in the rhetorical war. But he never made such a claim. Not once. And that silence is not neutral, it's damning. Because according to Franco, Arnold saw it with his own eyes, so why didn't he say anything? There are only two possibilities. One, Arnold saw it, but kept silent. This is extremely unlikely given Arnold's public persona, competitive instincts, and his known efforts to undermine Mentzer's influence. Two, Arnold never saw it because it didn't happen. This aligns with all available evidence from Mentzer's training partners, as well as Arnold's own critiques, which consistently assume Mentzer trained exactly as he said he did. Thus, Franco's statement doesn't merely fail to prove its point, it actually contradicts Arnold's well-documented criticisms. It attempts to show that Mentzer was a hypocrite, but ends up exposing a serious inconsistency in Franco's own account. If he and Arnold both saw Mentzer secretly using high-volume methods, Arnold's failure to mention it when it would have most benefited him during a period of open hostility and rivalry is inexplicable, unless, of course, it wasn't true. This contradiction turns Franco's statement on its head. What was meant to be a blow to Mentzer's reputation instead functions as evidence of his consistency. It vindicates him, using the words and silence of his greatest rival. Conclusion: a false memory or falsehood? After evaluating the timeline, training testimonies, gym affiliations, and public records, the conclusion is unmistakable. Franco Columbo's claim that Mike Mentzer trained for hours at a time is not supported by evidence, and is directly contradicted by the words and actions of Arnold Schwarzenegger himself. Mentzer's training philosophy was controversial, but it was always transparent. His methods were recorded, published, demonstrated, and corroborated by those who trained alongside him. Arnold, despite his intense rivalry with Mentzer, never once accused him of hypocrisy, only of using an approach Arnold disagreed with. That distinction is critical. Franco's statement, made years after Mentzer's death, appears to be either a lapse in memory or an effort to posthumously discredit a man whose philosophy challenged the very foundation of the high-volume system that Franco and Arnold championed. Either way, the accusation doesn't survive scrutiny. Mike Mentzer may have challenged the orthodoxy, but he never betrayed his own principles. In the final analysis, it wasn't Mentzer who misrepresented the truth. It was those who sought to rewrite it.